Greetings and salutations, friends and gamers of all stripes, and Happy New Year, and Happy New Decade. Yes, we are back in the 20s, and I, for one, am pretty excited about that fact. So, got a couple things to be looking at today, because with the new year and the passing of Christmas and all that means some new things to look at, new things to look forward to, including a couple new bits of game content to take a look at and review, including this little thing I picked up, Deadlands Noir, which, for those of you who saw my review of Good Intentions, should have a pretty good idea of how a review for this is going to be approached. So, in the coming weeks, I'm going to read through this, we're going to crack this open, we'll take a look at it, and then I'll go through it on video with you guys to let you know the ins and outs of what's available in here. But, in terms of the bare bones, this moves the Deadlands storyline forward from the late 1800s into the early 1920s and 30s, or into the 1920s and 30s, I should say, during the time of the Great Depression in New Orleans. So, pretty interesting shift in terms of the setting, moving a little bit away from the Wild West setting that the series is known for and forward into the 20s and 30s during the era of the Depression. So that's what I'm looking forward to, definitely taking a look at. But that's not what we're going to be looking at today. No, today we're going to be looking at this. Yes, the Bloodborne card game. Now, I picked this up for my wife, actually, for Christmas. Really for both of us, since we're both major fans of the video game. And this isn't going to be an exactly a first impressions thing. I have already cracked open the box. As you can see, the film on the outside is gone. I've gone through, I've opened up, I've punched out all the cardboard pieces, assembled everything that needs to be assembled to actually play the game. But we're going to take a look at what comes with the game. We're going to take a look at the rules, talk about that a little bit, and see what kind of potential this game has to offer. And then at a later point, after I've had a chance to actually play it, I'll give a proper review of the game, and we'll see how it is. From the reviews I've read online, we're mostly positive, so definitely looking forward to this. And I mean, Bloodborne's like my fucking favorite video game, so I'm definitely looking forward to giving this a try. But before we get into this, let's talk about the new year. Let's talk about the new decade. Let's talk a little bit about 2019. So, 2019, marks the first full actual year that I've been active with my content creation. I would say with my YouTube channel, but let's be honest, about halfway through, about 6 months into the life of the channel, I already branched out into multiple social media platforms and another video hosting platform over on BitChute, which, by the way, as usual, you can find links to all my social media and my BitChute in the description down below. I highly recommend following me there because YouTube is just not as stable and not as reliable as it used to be. It really isn't. And the fact of the matter is there is original content that I'm uploading over on BitChute that is exclusive. For those of you who missed it, and those of you who might be interested in something a bit off the wall in terms of tabletop gaming content, something that takes a bit of the piss out of current events analysis, swing on over to BitChute and check out my Boss Curb Stompa Talks series. If you're a fan of Warhammer 40,000 or just a fan of ridiculous analysis, nonsensical analysis of current events, just something for fun, something for a laugh, something to, let go of a bit of the stress of dealing with all the bullshit that we have to deal day in and day out. Yeah, hop on over there and check out Curb Stompa Talks. It's a political analysis from the point of view of a 40k orc war boss. And it's fun as hell to record, even though it's absolute murder on my vocal cords. But, yeah, 2019, I just seen a lot of ups and downs with the channel. The beginning of the year, going into summer, we were doing pretty well. It was early in the life of the channel. We were pumping out a good amount of stuff, getting a variety of content going out there, looking at Savage Worlds, looking at Pathfinder 2, all that stuff. Some of which, some projects that started and never got finished in the forms of Let's Plays, because, just generally speaking, it's just something that I've kind of realized is like, it's not for me. I gave it a chance 3 different times throughout to 2019 and in part 2018 as well with the old FPS Heretic. We tried it again with Shadowrun Returns, which, and I didn't end up keeping up with that one. I did finish the game, but I didn't end up keeping up with recording it because it just got to be too strenuous on my voice, reading all the lines and everything. In a game that has no spoken lines, yeah, it makes it a little easier to actually read out all the lines, but keeping all the voices straight in my head that I was doing for people and stuff when I didn't really have the time when I was doing it to consistently play, and even if I did, that would have murdered my voice, so that fell by the wayside. We did a couple playthroughs, a couple races on my which one was it? Wipeout 2099, I believe it was, on my PlayStation, which, it was fun. It was entertaining enough, but trying to actually get audio recording to go well off the PlayStation was an absolute nightmare. It sounded terrible, and there was nothing to be done about that because the only mic that I had that worked was terrible. So that also ended up falling by the wayside, which, I say, lesson learned. Let's Plays, it's not really my thing. I don't really have the interest in doing that so much, in recording myself playing video games and doing that. I would much rather, if I'm doing anything that you could consider something of a Let's Play, I'd much rather it just be live tabletop play. Which, let's face it, if that happens, and it's still planned to happen, it's not going to be live, it's going to be pre-recorded. Because, well, YouTube doesn't really offer good streaming functionality anymore. And if I want to get good streaming functionality, well, I can't just bring a bunch of people into Google Hangouts anymore. No, I got to make sure they all have OBS and all this stuff, and it's just too damn difficult to make sure everyone I'm playing with has all the stuff they need with all the settings done right to make that happen. It's a hobby, not a job, so I'm not going to go to that level of effort. Screw that. So we're going to do it as I've mentioned before. The plan is still in place where we're going to record that as a podcast. So that should be pretty fun. And speaking of podcasts and games, those of you who saw my update from November may recall that I did mention the fact that I am working on my own game, which is going to be the first system, hopefully, if it's completed in time, the first system that I record and use for the podcast. And it's going pretty well. The progress has gone slower than I would have liked, but it's been working. So, yeah, there's that. But unfortunately, the latter half of 2019, as most of you are doubtless aware, it's been slow. There's not been a whole lot coming out. There's not been a whole lot done by me. And there's a lot of reasons for that. Work getting busier, life getting busier, honestly just getting distracted sometimes, trying to muster up the will to put in the work to get these projects done didn't always come easily. And then, of course, there was the fact that in October, I lost a good friend of mine to a heart attack, and that made things difficult. But we're back now. We're here. We took a little break for the holidays, for New Year's today, of course, and then mostly for Christmas, which is why the third part of the Exploring Characters series has not come out yet, but it is recorded. I just need to put the video work together, and that should be coming out by this weekend. So we'll be back on that by the weekend. And yeah, so we got that going. I've got a couple new character showcases lined up that I'm going to be working on. The aforementioned Kratos and the proper announcement now. I'm actually going to push Kratos off for a little bit later because I'm going to need to kind of go back through God of War again and sort of explore his story all over again, kind of refamiliarize myself with it so that I can get the information down and correct. But we're going to be moving to Bloodborne, and we're actually going to be taking a look for our next character showcase. We're going to be taking a look at Gehrman, the hunter from the Hunter's Dream, who assists you throughout the game, sort of explore the hints and information that's available in this game with its very obfuscated, obscure lore that you really have to dig for to sort of figure out, as is very common, apparently, with all the Souls games. This was the only one of them I played, so I couldn't say for sure, but according to other people who are fans of all the Souls series and of Sekiro and Bloodborne, that's very common for FromSoft games, is to obscure the lore and make it something that you kind of have to dig for. So that should definitely be a fun exploration, especially because a lot of it is left very open to interpretation. So this is one where it's not going to be me so much analyzing something that's fairly obvious. I'm going to get to analyze something a little more obscure. Now, last thing we want to do for this 2019 recap portion of the video is I need to give some thanks and a bit of a shout out to a few people who have been very helpful to me and who have kind of been there to sort of keep me going, keep me inspired, and, keep me doing what I'm doing. First and foremost among them being, my wife, who has, she's had my back with this whole thing all along, particularly with designing the game. It's like, that's one of the things I struggle with, is a lot of self-doubt. So she's been real good at reminding me that, no, I have the capability. I can make something work. I've got that creative drive that can make it happen. So I need to thank her. I want to thank my friends, Brandon, Brian, and Luke, who always have my back, who are always there, like when and where they can, watching my videos, giving me my support, giving me suggestions and new ideas. And of course, some friends of mine from over on Mines, Raph, Aragmar, and Mr. Brushface, who we all sort of work with each other to kind of keep each other driven to do what we do, even though we sometimes kind of fall off the bandwagon. Aragmar in particular is real good about keeping people driven, and you should absolutely, if you haven't, you should swing on over to Amazon and look up his Star Shatter sci-fi series. I finished the first book a few weeks ago. I still need to put together my review for it on the channel here. But yeah, I finished the first book a few weeks ago. It's definitely a lot of fun. Very, very pulpy, action-heavy, lots of good, easy to lose yourself in entertainment. So give that a look. It's well worth it, I think. And of course, there are a couple other YouTubers who are in content creators in general, who have shown me their support here and there. The Legion of Myth channel actually just today gave me a shout out over on Minds, and I'd like to thank them for that, because apart from me having their back by giving them some support over on Minds to help get their reach out there a little bit more, they've had my back too, supporting me, when I've hit downtime, talking with me and keeping me on the right track. Same thing with, or similarly, Grim Jim and the RPG Pundit, though we do not talk extensively over on Minds. I've had some interesting discussions with them, and they've been cool enough, actually, with their podcast channel to actually follow my work here on YouTube, which I think is pretty neat because these guys are all veterans of the industry, and that's kind of cool. It's like, here I am, some fucking schlub from California who's just started designing his first game after years of sitting on his ass about and wanting to do that but never pulling the trigger. And, they've been kind of following me and quietly watching what I've done, and I think that's, that's kind of neat to know. So thank you to them, and of course thanks to all of my subscribers and my family, every one of you who has stuck by me through the growth of this project, both here and on BitChute. It has been kind of cool. I've been getting more people actually recently watching on BitChute, really interacting with my content. One guy in particular, you know who you are. I've noticed you've been interacting a lot. I've noticed those comments coming up, and I'm sorry that I haven't had the time to reply to any of them yet. But soon, things are going to be kind of slowing down, opening up a little bit more. Once New Year's is properly passed, kind of when we get into the weekend, we'll be able to really go through and kind of take a look at those things that you've been saying. But thank you for the interest. Thank you for the interaction, even if it's negative. Even if it's negative, it's like, criticism, hell, even hate. And it doesn't bother me, But yeah, so let's get into the box here. So, like I said, this is not really a first impressions. I did open it last night, but here's basically what you got. You got your rule book. You got your 2 sleeves, as you can see, already punched out of all your tokens and stuff. So, the way the game basically works is this between 3 and 5 players, and each of you takes control of a hunter using one of these game boards here. And you've got 3 tracks that you can follow, which these tracks represent trophies you gather throughout the game as you kill monsters. Each of the monsters, and we'll see when I look at the cards, is going to have one or more of these symbols in the lower corner. And when you select one of those symbols, you move a token along the track here. And this helps to determine, at the end of the game, this helps you determine the winner. Got up in the corner here, the blood echoes you collect from fighting monsters throughout the game. And then down here, your blood echo bank, where they all go when you return to the hunter's dream. So people who are familiar with Bloodborne should already be recognizing a lot of these terms. They should be recognizing a lot of these symbols. Players of the game will know, like this here, the symbol for the kin type monsters in the card game here. This is actually the icon from the game for one of the hunter tools, the Augur of Abritas. And then same with this one. This one is here, is the icon from the game for the Dark Beast's Roar. It's been a little stylized. And that's really actually one of the only criticisms that I have of this game is in the manual. In the manual here, they do have a little bit of original art. They got a little bit of original art up at the top here. A little bit of art taken, I think, from the strategy guide here. But generally speaking, the cards, the tokens, everything, they use just assets from the game, which is fine. Like here we've got the token for whoever the first player for the round is. As you can see, it's the hunter from the game box. It's an in-game asset, which is fine. It still looks really good. The game looks fucking fantastic. It's very stylish and well designed, so that's appropriate to use that. But actually looking at it, I'm seeing he's reversed. He's got the gun and the melee weapon in reverse hands from where he should. But this is a token for whoever the first player of a specific round is. So this gets passed around the board as you guys play through the game. Each round, this moves to the left, denoting whoever the first player is. And of course, the first player is the first person who acts. Once they act, it then moves to the left around the table from them. So it's always moving clockwise, the rounds of play. So you got that. You've got your different trophy tokens. There's 5 of each, because the game goes up to 5 players, between 3 and 5 players. There's your kin tokens for your trophies, humanoid tokens, and beast tokens. Now, some monsters, particularly the final boss monsters, which are the first ones on the stack, will have multiple tokens. You can see Vicar Amelia here has all 3. Normally you would choose one of them. I believe actually all the final bosses have all three of them. So here's one thing, though, that I did find interesting is the different creatures, the 5 different monsters that they chose for the final bosses. Only 2 of them are actual potential final bosses from the game. Gehrman the First Hunter, who I did mention we will be discussing in a later video, and Murgo's Wet Nurse. They are both, this is the first and second of the potential final bosses in Bloodborne. Spoilers if you haven't played Bloodborne, by the way. With the third being the secret final boss, but I was actually really surprised they did not include that one. But all the other bosses are kind of bosses that come out from key points in the game. Vicar Amelia is really the first really tough, major boss that you hit. You know, she's the one that's really there to test you, and she's the stopgap between progressing any further in the game. If you can't beat her, you are not going to get to the second portion of the game. You know, Mikolash is the boss that occurs right before Murgo's Wet Nurse in the game. And then Rom, the vacuous spider, fills a slot similar to Vicar Amelia, where you need to defeat Rom to progress to the next major portion of the game. You know, it's an interesting selection, largely because the final boss monsters are supposed to pretty much be the toughest challenges to fight. But honestly, of the 5 they picked, only these 2 are a serious challenge. The rest of them are pretty easy once you learn what you're doing. But these 2 always pose a pretty fair challenge. Still, it's a good set of bosses. And each of the bosses, of course, has interesting different abilities. Vicar Amelia cuts your maximum health down to 6. Mikolash makes it so that new monsters will be added to the deck if monsters that you're fighting escape instead of being killed. Gehrman gives +2 health to all other creatures. Murgo's Wet Nurse, weirdly enough, heals you every round. And Rom, this one seems particularly brutal to me. Well, if you die, you only get to die once. Normally, you can die multiple times and keep coming back, but of course you'll lose your blood echoes when you do. With Rom, no, you die once. Then if you die again, you're eliminated from the game. So, here, they just kind of stack it up, which this is one thing I do wish. I do wish they had packed this a little bit differently. Maybe set the blood echoes off to the side in this little bay here, and then keep the deck of monsters and the deck of hunters over here, or our hunter cards over here. But yeah, you've got your 2 sets of cards. You could tell from the backing. The one with the hunter symbol on them is the cards that you take from to build your Chalice Dungeon set, which is going to determine the creatures you fight through the game. And it is randomized. The ones with the hunter on the back are your actual equipment cards that you get, including your starter cards, which you do need to set aside. Every character starts with the same 5 different cards, but you modify that as you go through the game. So, as you can see, again, it's all in-game assets. There's a wide variety of different creatures with different difficulties. Some of the decisions they made are very strange to me, as someone who knows the game well. For example, the church servant here. You know, when revealed things, obviously when he's drawn, when he gets put out as the creature, you know, this effect happens. But the thing that's interesting to me is here you've got the health, the type of damage they deal, which is determined by the colored dice. So the color of the lantern determines the dice that you roll. Green is the easiest, yellow is medium, red is the most difficult. So he's very easy, and you gain blood echoes based on their health. However much health they have on the card, plus whatever additional they're given, is how many blood echoes you can potentially get from them, and how much damage you need to deal to kill them. So the church servant, which anyone who's played the game knows, is a relatively easy enemy. but, can be fairly tough sometimes. They can actually deal quite a bit of damage if you don't know what you're doing against them, especially as they are now. Notice the little eyeballs there. This is a special version of the church servant that is much more difficult than the regular one you fight in the game. Well, appropriately, the church servant is tougher than the regular huntsman, who is just the first real standard enemy that you face. Is just your typical cursed Yharnamite, your infected Yharnamite, who is infected with the Scourge of Beasts. But then we get to something a little more unusual. Here's a good example. The Bloody Crow of Canehurst in the video game, is one of the late game enemies. Very tough. One of the hardest hunter enemies to beat. And appropriately, he's got 6 health, so he's got a good amount of health, and he uses the red die. But then you get to the Carrion Crows, which are one of the easiest to kill enemies in the game. Little crows who drag along the ground and can fly for a little bit to try and peck at your face. They're not difficult to deal with. They have very low health. They're generally pretty easy, yet for some reason, 7 health. Yeah, some of the decisions they made are pretty questionable. 7 health. Those crows have as much health as this unique enemy in the game, who, appropriately, they took the image from when you fight him in the Chalice dungeons. He acts as a Chalice dungeon boss in the video game, and one unique enemy in the actual outer world. So some of these decisions are a little unusual. Man-Eater Boar, for example, is an enemy in the game with quite a bit of health, who gives quite a bit of blood echoes, and is fairly dangerous. But here in the card game, very low blood echoes, still dangerous, but very low blood echoes. Some unusual decisions, which, they did leave me kind of scratching my head a little bit, but, when you're designing a new game, you've got to kind of course, adapt and make some changes. So we'll see how it all works out. It's just some of the decisions, as someone who knows the game, had me scratching my head a little bit. But we do have a good variety of different creatures with different abilities. The card stock is solid. It feels very nice. It's real firm. It's a good thickness. Not too thick, not too thin. The printing is really well done. They've got a nice little bit of a shine to them, but not so much that it's difficult to see. It just feels good in your hand. And then we get to the different boss monsters as well, all of them taken from the game. Brightus, Martyr Ligarius, Watchdog of the Old Lords, One Reborn, Cleric Beast, Father Gascoigne, the Witch of Hemwick. So, an interesting selection of creatures and bosses from the game. All on good card stock. Here we got the health dials thing, which were the large circles on each of these 2 bits of card stock. The front and the back. Normally you have 8 health, and then you just dial it down as you get damaged. It's good, nice, thick pieces of cardboard. Plastic plug in there is, it's firm but loose enough that you can easily turn it. So that's a good thing. I have had it happen before with games like this that have things like this where it's too tight and it starts actually damaging the cardboard discs, which really reduces the longevity of it. The blood echoes, the single point and 5-point ones, are these nice, thick plastic discs. They've got a good look to them, nice marbled printing on them. That gives them a proper look of blood, which is very thematically appropriate. And yeah, the interior of the box is set up very intentionally to be easy to store everything, which is a huge, huge plus. And of course, you've got the different hunter cards with your 3 types. Red border meaning melee weapon, blue border meaning ranged weapon, gray border meaning utility. First sets are all hunter cards, as I mentioned, or starter cards, excuse me. As I mentioned, every hunter starts with the same 5. So you've got the hunter's axe, the saw cleaver, the hunter pistol, the transform card, and the hunter's dream card, which allow you to do various things in the game, which we'll go into after I actually do a proper review of the game. And then you've got different items. Again, all the assets taken directly from the game, which is fine because, as I mentioned, the game is very good looking. It's definitely, FromSoft is really good about getting their unique style down. But this is one that was kind of interesting for me personally. Again, as someone who plays the game, the Molotov cocktail art, well, that's actually the art for the rope Molotov, which you throw behind you, not the normal Molotov that you throw. So I thought that was kind of funny. Threaded cane, Kirk hammer, all familiar weapons from the game. And of course, not every weapon from the game made it in, and all of these different weapons are ones that you get as upgrades, drawing from the hunter deck when you return to the hunter's dream. And many of them have different effects. So, there it is, yeah. So, the Bloodborne card game. In terms of quality of what they give you, it is pretty damn good. All of the cardboard stock is nice and thick. It's very firm. It's well printed. One criticism I have is that the player boards, as you can see, they are a little bit bowed. That is something that I wish did not happen, but, you can only ask for so much. And then the other nice thing is you get the rule book here. It's nice, it's short, it's quick, it's very to the point. They give concise examples. The total rule book is 15 pages. And then they have a quick start guide on the back with the game setup and what each thing does as reference. All in all, I read through the rule book last night. It was very easy to understand. And I feel like with just a quick reference, I shouldn't have any real problems teaching anyone the game. So, yeah, that's our first look at the Bloodborne card game. 3 to 5 players. It's generally supposed to take about 30 minutes to an hour. I'm sure there's a little bit of wiggle room for learning curve, but looking at it and what I've read from the rules, it definitely seems like a fun game with a lot of strategy, particularly because it is intentionally set up to be a cooperative, competitive experience. You have to work with each other, but you're also competing against each other at the same time to come out on top and be the one who wins, the one who escapes the nightmare. So definitely looking forward to playing this when I can get my family together or some friends together, get enough people. And yeah, I'll be coming back to you at a later time with a full, proper review of the game and how the gameplay went. So for now, friends and gamers of all stripes, once again, my name is GM Dave. I am your man behind the screen. Happy New Year. Happy new decade. I'm looking forward to 2020 and what the new 20s are going to bring, and I hope you all are too.